Welcome back to another conversation, the DMGB conversation, which stands for It Doesn't Matter, Get Better, no matter what. Really excited to welcome a good friend of mine, a longtime friend of mine. We go way back to when she was carrying around water bottles around the football field, and I was out setting up drills. So the conversation is excited to welcome Liana Lozada to the conversation. Liana, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
You have a tremendous story that I'm excited to share with everybody. Again, I'll touch on our background. We go back to Florida State together when I was a young student there and just starting with the organization as an equipment manager. And you at that time were an aspiring athletic trainer. You were in the program. You were grinding away at it. And we both have gone our separate paths and lived a lot of different lives to get back here today. So I'm excited for you to share your story with everybody. This is your opportunity to tell us how it doesn't matter, get better. Give us the version of Liana that we need to know.
All right. So Cliff Notes. So as you touched on, I originally went to Florida State for athletic training, which I loved, but I have always had a creative spirit. I've always been in writing or the arts or creating in some sense. And I think that's also why I got so interested in the human body. And I think that's what led me to athletic training, just the anatomy, the physiology, how it works, how you can operate it. But while I was a trainer, there was just something that was missing. There was that creative element and sort of that freedom that I was missing out on. So one day I was actually on the track field, and I was facing the gym and the tennis courts, as you probably know where they are. And like all the cars are passing by, and it's like this beautiful day. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be here for the next 6 hours. And this will be the rest of my life if I keep doing this. Like it's going to be from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., 7 days a week, probably 6 days if I'm really lucky. And I was just like, this, I don't want to do this anymore.
This isn't it. I'm not doing it for me anymore.
Yeah, this isn't it. Like, and it was, I was already a junior. I was about 8 months away from graduating. I was almost done with the program. I was on scholarship, so it was a really big deal for me to sort of drop everything and switch gears. And so I spoke to a lot of people, and I actually spoke to my sorority sisters, and they're like, you've always been the writer of the group. Like people would hand me like, hey, we got to write this thing. Can you do this? Or, I was the education chair, so I was always doing seminars, and I was always digging into the communications aspects of things. I was in charge of internal communications, and I did external communications for the org. And they were in PR at the time. So that was sort of the closest understanding to what I wanted to do. So I quit at the shock and awe and anger of some. And then I applied to join the communications department, and I got in, and I ended up graduating about 6 months later than I had anticipated, but it was definitely one of the best decisions that I made.
I love that. I love that you were not afraid to listen to yourself inside. Very similar to myself when I transitioned out of coaching after a 10-year career. To hear that little voice inside that was like, yeah, we get it that you've always had this dream to be a head coach, but look at the journey in front of you. Like, look at what you've done for 10 years. Are you willing to do this for another 10 and be okay with whatever happens at the end of that road? And that was the real aha moment for me. That was like,
no,
maybe I should try something else. Maybe I'm not totally bought into that being the only thing I can do to help people, so I love it. So you drop everything, you get into communications, you chase your passion of writing, you listen to not only your inner dialogue, but you listen to the people around you. Now you are helping people tell their digital story. You are a digital storyteller for companies, for individuals. And I think it's an unbelievable thing that you do. How did you get from graduating school to now being an entrepreneur where you're helping people tell their digital story?
Woo! So I always say I lived a lot of lives. So I graduated, and I graduated into the economy crash. So it was a very challenging time to graduate, especially into media and communications, because all of these magazines were folding. There weren't jobs, there weren't opportunities. And here I am with this degree that was fit for this industry that is getting completely wiped out. So it's very kind of parallel to what's happening now, I feel like. And I realized I'm going to have to really go down into the gutter and learn this from like the bottom up. So I actually graduated from Florida State. I tried to find a job. It was impossible. And I realized, okay, this is not going to work. I need to go to the epicenter of where this industry lives, whether it's dying or not. And I'm going to have to just take an internship and then work on the side. So I picked up, I graduated in December. In January, I got an internship at a PR agency in New York City to work on a bunch of different clients there. I picked up and left in January, and I took the internship. I was there for about 6 months, and I was working part-time.
What were you doing to survive?
Bartending and working for a catering company. And
Serving.
yeah, I was in the service industry. God bless the service industry. Yeah, and I was doing what I could. And then I decided, okay, it's time for me to go back to South Florida. Came back. There still weren't enough jobs. So I then took another internship with Nikki Beach to work on their publication. 2 weeks after I got there, it folded. But I decided to stay on and just navigate this terrain with them. And I started working with the marketing director. And at the time, Twitter was this new thing. They're like, we don't know what to do with it. Can this be your baby? And I said, sure. So I basically launched the Nikki Beach's global Twitter page. And that's how that aspect of my career sort of started. So after a while I was with them, I was like, hey guys, I gotta go. I need to make money. I left, and then 2 weeks later they called me back and like, hey, we want to offer you a job. So I was with them for about a year, and then the editorial itch started to scratch, and I applied for a local newspaper job, like a very entry-level job. And I got it. I was the club's listings editor for a local newspaper.
What paper? Give a shout out to the paper.
New Times. Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And they were also in a very strange transition because print was sort of dying, and they were trying to figure out, what do we do? What is this digital thing? How does this work? So I was writing at the same time, and then also helping navigate, how do we promote our articles on Twitter? How do I promote myself as a writer? Because they don't have the budgets to do what they were doing before. So it was really just a way of being scrappy. It was really scrappy at the time to like use social media as a marketing tool. And that's kind of how these two little worlds of mine first met. So yeah, now years later, I've worked at agencies. I've written for national publications and local publications. I did a lot of travel writing in my 20s. And that sort of led me to this point where I decided to package all of this experience into—
Side note, when you were doing your travel writing, you were updating everywhere you were on Instagram. And I would be like, what? I don't know what her job is, but she was staying at the most elite hotels in the most elite locations. I was like, what is she? And I'd be in like meetings. We'd be in like football meetings like all day. And I would like be scrolling through my timeline being like, I got to figure out, because I'm in the wrong business.
It was amazing.
That's awesome to see that you're doing that, and to see all the things that you went through to get there now. And I think it's really great for you to talk about, you know, when you meet somebody and they want to tell their digital story, how do you figure out how to tell somebody's digital story? And what does that look like?
So basically, thankfully, this is where my journalism background really comes into play, because I have been trained to ask questions that lead to in-depth digging answers. not yes or no, like really like, tell me about this. I did a lot of interviewing, celebrities, trainers, things while I was with Ocean Drive Magazine. I was an editor there. So you really have to study how someone's going to respond and find ways to get them to think about things that maybe they hadn't thought about before. And that's when you get the great quotes and the great articles. And you're like, you read an interview and you're like, man, that was a great interview. And there's so much prep that goes into that before you even walk into the room. So
Right.
The same thing happens with clients. I sit down and I look at where they are online. What pieces have they already published? What articles have they already been featured in? What does their social media say about them? What does their website say? And I compile all that, and then I interview them in a sense to get an idea of where the inconsistencies are in their story and where they can be strengthened. So
I love this. I love this. So if you were to walk into somebody as a blank canvas, they've got absolutely no social media exposure right now. They've got no digital exposure. They've got no website. They've got absolutely nothing. How do you advise to move forward in that kind of scenario? Because I'm talking from experience.
Yeah.
The way we deal with salespeople, most of them that have been in the game for a long, long time are not interested in social media. They think that it's something that can't affect their business. And obviously we know different, that they're missing on a huge opportunity. So what's your advisement to getting started if you're not even in the game?
First things first, always get a sense of who your customer is. Because what I hear a lot is, always put the customer first. And this is especially across the board. Like if you're already in the game, you've already dealt with people. You already know the questions that you're going to get asked. You already know kind of the ropes of what it is to onboard somebody, get someone to sell, and you start there. You start with the customer. Then also figure out what are your strengths. You know what I mean? Because they're like, oh, but I'm not good on camera and I don't know how to do video. And I'm like, that's totally fine. What are you good at? Let's start with what you're good at. Let's focus on what you're good at. Always start with your strengths and your customer, and then build from there.
Okay, so I think this is a great thing to talk about, because then the next question that people have is, what do I do next? Like, do I do Twitter? Do I do Instagram? Do I do Facebook? Do I do LinkedIn, TikTok? Do I get a website? What do I put on my website? What's your advice on? Obviously, I know that it's omni-channel, so I know that you're going to say do all of them, but
Right.
how do you go about doing it?
I think first we start with going back to the customer, right? So if you've got a customer that, let's say, skews in, early teens to mid 20s, then we're obviously going to have a conversation about TikTok, and we're obviously going to have to have a conversation about Instagram. If you have a customer base that has sort of grown with social media, like the millennial generation, we understand Facebook, we understand Twitter, but we're kind of like, do I need to be on TikTok? So we would kind of skew there. If you are, a professional service, then we really need to talk about LinkedIn. We really need to talk about your presence there. Not only the company's presence, but we also need to talk about how your employees are going to elevate the company's presence and want to participate in it. So there's so many.
You're like becoming my spokesperson right now. I love what you're saying. I love what you're saying.
Yeah. So, it's really kind of looking at all these different pieces and putting them together in the right sort of tapestry to tell your story.
I love that. So you dive into the questions that, get great answers. But when you're talking about telling somebody's digital story, right, that's not necessarily writing an article, right? No. You're also trying to figure out how to create brand, create relationship within the customers. What are some of those questions? Because like you talked about, and we talked about this before prior to when we started talking, it's all about building trust, exactly. Right? So how are you helping people in a digital environment build trust with customers or future customers?
Yes. So there's two parts to that. And I think I'll start with creating a digital presence and a strong, consistent digital presence, I feel is like one of the best ways to create trust to especially a new customer or consumer. Because I always tell my clients, wherever somebody finds you, they need to understand who you are, why you're different, and how you can serve them. Those are the most important things. Like, it may not necessarily be like you have the best images, you may not have, you know, all the bells and whistles, but if you are speaking directly to the need in which they searched out for you, they're gonna gravitate towards you. And if you have, you know, you may not have, you know, an amazing Twitter, an amazing LinkedIn, but if 2 out of the 3 or 4 out of the 5 are strong enough, they're going to say, hey, this company or this individual cares about their reputation. I try not, because sometimes the word, you know, personal brand is offsetting to people. This is about your online reputation. This is about your resume without someone asking for it. It's saying, here's what you need to know. Here's what you need to know.
Right now. So it's amazing the parallels to what you're teaching people to do in the digital world and what we're teaching salespeople to do in the digital world is and this is a conversation we have all the time with people, is that the people are the ones that matter. Right? The people are going to lead the other customers to your brand. Very rarely is the logo on the door going to just draw people in. It's the people that you're interacting with, and if people don't like you, there's no way they're going to buy from you. Exactly. So building trust. So I think so are you saying that if 4 or 5 of them are strong enough, is that because you don't know where people are going to find you, or because people tend to look in all the different places?
I think sometimes, and that depends also on the type of company. So like, for example, if you're a restaurant, you can for sure guarantee that they're going to look at your Yelp and they're going to look at your Instagram, and then they'll probably go to your website to see, you know, what your hours are and, you know, how do I make a reservation? What do I need to know? Let's look at the menu. That, you know, if you are someone who is going to be taking someone's investment money, they're going to look at your website. They want to know about your credentials. They want to know about your portfolio. They're going to look at your LinkedIn to make sure you're you know, credible and that people are actually participating. You're not some scam company. And they might be less likely to go to your Instagram. So it kind of goes to the client. You know what I mean? Again, we're going to focus on what your strengths are, and then eventually we will build up the other aspects of what your brand is going to look like.
I love that.
Because otherwise it can get very overwhelming if you're like, oh, I have these 10 things that need to be fixed. You know, how do we do this? And like, it's really a step-by-step, slow, it's a marathon. It's 100% a marathon when it comes to your digital presence.
I love that. So when you're starting to work with people and you're starting to tell people's digital story, what does that timeline look like for you? You say it's a marathon, but obviously everybody wants to see ROI. You know what I mean? So how do you educate people on the fact that this is the stock market beyond stock market? Like this is your retirement fund. You're putting your money into this. You're putting your time into this. You're putting your effort into this, not to pay dividends tomorrow, but to pay dividends a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road.
Yeah. So it's funny that you bring this up. So I was actually listening to, and I always get his last name wrong. The author of Start With Why. So he did a
Simon Sinek?
Yes. How do you say his last name?
Sinek.
Okay. So he did a talk with Inc. yesterday, and he brought up this great analogy of how everybody talks about business in like athletics terms or like war or like all these things. And he's like, you have to think of it as, let's say your business is like a healthy lifestyle, right? And let's say that's your infinite goal. I want to live a healthy lifestyle so that I have longevity throughout the years, right? And within that, you have finite goals. And you can say, okay, well, within this healthy lifestyle, that's long game, I want to lose 20 pounds by August 1st, right? That's your goal. That's like your finite goal. And I think so many times that finite goal is how people want to define themselves, when really as long as we're moving in that direction, you're playing the long game. Because if you don't hit your 20 pounds on August 1st, and let's say you hit 18, you're still
You're still doing good.
Yeah. Are you not going to take those 18 pounds? You know what I mean? So
it's so funny that you brought up that webinar, because I watched it as well. I was watching it as well. And for those people who don't know Simon Sinek, he is an ultimate philosopher. He is great in understanding people's behavior and leadership. And he is another proponent of It's All About the People. But he talks about, and if you haven't read his book, The Infinite Game, we in the sports world, it's a 60-minute game. And you have to score more points than the other team in order to win. And there is a win and a loss. And most people equate business and life to a finite game, even though it's infinite. You're never going to win business. Like Apple is winning, like Tesla is winning, like the unbelievable stat for those who don't know. Tesla actually got rid of half of their sales force and moved the other half to hourly wage and got rid of commissions because the car sells itself. They don't really need salespeople. So Tesla is winning a business, but there's never an end. Like unless you're looking for an exit and a payout on your business, business is forever. The object of the game is to stay in business. So having finite goals is good because it pushes progress and it pushes growth. But like you said, just because you don't hit that goal doesn't mean you haven't had great success on your way to that goal.
No, and he liked that, right?
It's great that you pulled that.
Yeah, and there's so many ways to track KPIs within social media. There's so many ways. And I try to, of course, there's a way to generate leads and track sales, and you can do that with UTMs, and we can do that with sprints and different numbers and tracking. But it's such an amazing tool to understand your customer and how your customer is evolving and what's really resonating with them and what's not, based on how they respond to what you do. So, and something
I love about what you're saying right now is that there are a lot of people out on LinkedIn in particular that are the marketing gurus of how to grow your influence on LinkedIn, right? How to get great engagement is what everybody's talking about, right? And the way to calculate engagement on LinkedIn is take your views and or take your comments and likes and divide it by the number of views, and you get this percentage on engagement, and that means whether or not you're having success. What you're saying is very different than that. You're saying using social media and building relationship, which is not the norm for what people are talking about when using social media, correct?
I mean, if you come down to the origins of social media, the first word is social. Like, people still want to feel like there's someone at the other end. Like they're not talking to a robot. They're not talking to even though I get paid to speak on behalf, there has to be a human element to what I'm doing. And I really have to understand the language of my brand. Like I can't respond to everything in the same way. One demographic is going to expect a tone that's different, and all of it has to be authentic. And you could totally, I have to do analytical reports. I have to do all those things, but there is no single number that's a measure of your success. And I think that's what also makes it very hard for people to grasp social media. Like, what's the key number? And I'm like, there really isn't one, because we can do a campaign that is strictly done to increase your viewership. More people are going to see it, right? We could do a campaign that is focusing more on clicks and getting people to, I worked with a condo hotel and they had like a leasing campaign. So the whole campaign was framed to get people to fill out the leasing form. That's completely different than, I just want you to see it.
Right.
Then, this focus is not to engage with it. This focus is to, like it or click the button. And what people also don't understand is sometimes going towards one thing is naturally going to reduce the number of the other thing. That doesn't mean it's not successful. You're just trying to see where you're going to fall long term.
So I have a question for you, because what if you are looking for the same customer, right? I know who my customer is, and your advice may be, oh, well, that person, that demographic is really more skewed to Facebook, but they want to go across all channels. I don't care. Even if there's only 5 of my customers on Twitter, I want to make sure I find those 5. How do you go about communicating differently on each of the platforms? Or is it because you're looking for the same customer, the communication is the same?
No, the communication, I feel like, it's very rare that the communication is going to be exactly the same on all of the platforms. So because people engage with the platforms differently, their mindset when they come into something is completely different. So, you know, if there's an article, you're looking for information on articles, you're probably going to be more likely to click on that on Facebook, right? So you can't really do that on Instagram in the same way unless you have the swipe up feature and it goes through the whole thing. Twitter is more engaging in that sense, but then you have to also deal with the scrolling thing that you might deal with Instagram. So it's like we should be trying to like cast the net to make sure that we're speaking to everyone, but cater to what the platform's strengths are. You know what I mean?
So making sure that you're paying attention to best practices 100%. Across the platform as you put your content out there.
100%. Yeah, 100%. You know, it's the big thing that I have to often do when I onboard somebody is like, oh, we have our Instagram just automatically uploading to Twitter, like blindly. And I'm like, well, have you looked at your Twitter? Like, how's it doing? And I'm like, well, no one's engaging with it. I'm like, yeah, because it's like, why? You know what I mean?
Right.
They have no incentive. And the thing is too, it's such a dense environment. Like social media is even when I use it, you know, it's such a dense, there's so much coming at you. And it's so harmful to assume that you are worth listening to just because you feel like you're worth listening to.
I love that. So how do you craft the right message to break through the noise? Because this is what we talk about in sales, right? Like the cold call and the cold email are very inefficient in today's world. Today's world is all about using the new tools to break through the communication clutter. How do you advise people that they do that?
The first thing I tell them in terms of understanding how to do that for their customer or for their brand is to watch their own behavior. Like I have been in a room where I have sort of onboarded like a new client, no understanding of how social media works. And it was literally like, let's sit down, take out your phone and scroll until you stop on something. And when you stop on something, pick up your phone and everybody show me what you stopped on. And so that sort of engaged on a conversation on like a bigger level of, oh man, some people stopped on similar things and some people stopped on completely different things. So that helps you sort of like understand the scope of what you're dealing with. If that makes sense. I don't know if I went off on a tangent.
No, I love that. I love, because to me, the way to simplify that is saying, even though it's the same platform, everybody communicates in a different way on that platform.
Correct.
You know, like there are a lot of people who are just scrollers. There are a lot of people who are likers. There are a lot of people who are commenters or shares or a combination of all of them. And you have to make sure that you reach each one of them in their own way. I mean, it's very similar to coaching. You know, when you're trying to teach or just teaching in general, when you're teaching something, you can't communicate it in only one way. Right? You have people who are auditory learners, who are visual learners, people who learn through doing. Like there are all different kinds of learning styles. And if you plan to teach everybody in the class, you can make sure you hit each one of those learning styles. It's the exact same concept when you're going in for communicating on a platform. everybody's going to take your message a different way. So you got to communicate it a few different ways. Long form copy, short form with picture, video, GIF, all those kinds of things.
Yeah, and consistency, and this is also going back to the long game. Consistency is key, because if you've put all this effort for a short game engagement and then you fall off, they're not dumb. Like, they know that you're in it just for the sale, and that could turn off a base. They're just selling me. They're only existing on here to sell me. Like, they don't, they don't really care that I am enjoying what I am engaging with. And especially now where people are saying, hey, take a digital detox, like, now that's such a more valuable time, because people are aware that they're constantly on their phones or constantly on, their computers. So make it valuable for them. Like, show them that this is time that you value, and you value that they're engaging, and you value that they're even following you, instead of constantly trying to, like, grab at whatever you can get.
So I got a question for you.
Okay.
Where does your brand live?
Where does my brand live right now? I would say
You're so busy handling everybody else's brands for your clients. Where's your brand?
Right? And that's always such a tricky part. So I would say right now my brand is living primarily on Instagram stories, more specifically, Facebook stories, although my article work gets a lot more traction on Facebook and LinkedIn. So I would say those three are really my core. I'm still active on Twitter. I still have a Pinterest account. I'm on TikTok.
You're on TikTok.
Yeah, I'm on TikTok.
I'm not on TikTok. I'm not there yet.
Yep. The title of the conversation is.
I hear you.
Yeah, I'm on TikTok. What else? I'm trying to think of what else. I have my website. And I try to translate as much of that as I can. But again, they're each very, very specific. And you have to ask yourself, okay, when you start this whole thing, when you start creating your personal brand, and I did this exercise when I was at an agency, and I have to credit them. It's probably one of the best exercises we ever did. We stopped and we asked ourselves, and this is a Tesla thing, so you're probably going to like it. We asked, okay, if your brand or your reputation was a car right now, what would it be?
We do the same exercise.
Yeah.
My dad asks it in every single training that he does. If you were a car brand, what brand would you be? Right. Now, we usually do that to drive home the point of experience. Yeah. When you buy a Mercedes, you don't necessarily buy a Mercedes because it's that much different as a car. You buy it because there's an experience that's involved with it. Right. So,
and that is how you translate that into your digital presence. So, like, let's say my brand right now is a minivan. Like, based on when I land on all your social media, you are a minivan. But in your mind, you think you're a Tesla. We've got a problem. Like, we've got some work to do. Not only in the experience sector, like in the one-on-one, but also how that experience translates to the world. Like, you can't say you're a Tesla and everybody in the room's like, yeah, we're Teslas. And
everybody's looking at you like a Ford Focus. The miscommunication somewhere.
There's a miscommunication somewhere. So I'm glad that
you are the queen of communicating everybody's digital story.
Right. Yeah. I'll wear.
So where can they find you? Where should they find you? Where's the best place to find you?
The best place to find me, I would say, I'm Liana Lozada across everything.
Cool.
So wherever you type me in, you will find me. Awesome. Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, my website. Where else?
I love it.
TikTok.
And the list goes on.
The list goes on. Yeah. So you'll find me. You can find me in all those places.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time with us today. I appreciate you educating the audience on the value of a digital story, on the value of understanding how to communicate across platforms and within the platform in a lot of different ways. I think there's some unbelievable insight in this, and I know people will get value from it, and I hope they reach out to you to help them tell their digital story.
Thank you so much. This was great. I really enjoyed this. I could go on and on and on, but I'm like, I don't want to bore anybody.
Well, I got news for you. There's a chance that you and I are going to take this offline because I think there's some definite synergies that I want to pick your brain on, and I hate saying that, but I want to get some of your expertise in digital storytelling. So thank you for everything you did today. It doesn't matter. Get better. Keep finding ways to communicate with your audience, and I'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you for watching, everyone.